fought tirelessly for voting rights, campaign finance reform, and a government that listens. Beto O'Rourke is one of those people. So please stand up and help me welcome our president, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke.
Let's hear it for Congressman Anson. He's still got it. He's still got it. Chairman Trahan, thank you for the powerful words, the introduction, and for bringing all of these great people together. And I mean everyone. And if you're a Republican, I want you to know you're in the right place. If you're a Democrat, we're glad that you came. Independents, you are welcome as well. This one is for each and every single one of us. A special thanks as well to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and President Lovely, who's right there in the back, who has welcomed us here today. Thank you, sir, for your service in the city and your service to our country in uniform. We're here with you. It is an honor to be with you. I'm thinking about the fact that we are celebrating soon the 4th of July. 249 years ago, we got this thing kicked off. And it's amazing. If you read the Declaration of Independence, that's what we're celebrating, is its ratification by the Second Continental Congress. This foundational idea within that document, which is the foundational idea for our country. And it's absolutely audacious when you think about it in the whole of human history, that we are acknowledging that each and every single one of us is created equally. And what flows from that is that each of us should expect to be treated equally under the laws of this nation. No tyrants, no kings, no one above the law, no one above the law, just a government of, by, and for the people. In the Declaration, the framers talked about these unalienable rights, these things that no one, including our government, can take from us. I bet you can quote them. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And that we institute a government to safeguard these rights. And it is a government that only has legitimacy with the consent of the people who are governed. This idea, 249 years ago, shocked the world. The idea of self-government, that we could freely and fairly choose those who would represent us in positions of public trust, that we ourselves would have the opportunity to run for those positions of power, absolutely lit the world on fire. And look, it should go without saying, but it does bear repeating, that at the time, you had to be white, you had to be a man, and you had to own property to qualify for any of the things that I was talking about. But here's the genius, in my opinion, of this great country. That we never stopped working towards fulfilling the promise of those words. As you know, 100 years later, not even, we fought a civil war to determine once and for all whether one American could own another American. And the idea that flowed from that after it was settled at that courthouse in Appomattox in 1865 was not only would we no longer tolerate the institution of slavery, but we would actually live up to that promise that we'll all be treated equally under the law. And for one brief shining moment, I don't know if it lasted a dozen or 15 years during Reconstruction, we actually saw that come to pass muscle menos across the United States, including the states of the former Confederacy, including right here in the state of Texas. Darkness, however, would once again fall upon this country, and for more than 90 years, we saw Jim Crow. We saw people treated less than equal under the law, less than citizens, even though they were born here, even though they and their forefathers and foremothers literally built this country and the success that so many enjoyed. But we never stopped trying. Countless and unsung, unnameable heroes labored in obscurity. They fought, they marched, they protested. They wanted to be heard. They wanted to be treated as women and men in this country equal to anyone else. And it took a president from the great state of Texas, his name was Lyndon Baines Johnson, who used all of the political capital at his command in 1964 to pass what Americans had been working on for decades, the Civil Rights Act of that year. And we all know the story. It wasn't just that he was a genius, that he did the right thing at the right time with the power that he had, and he did. But it was that the American people, remember we were talking about the consent of the government, they really pushed him and forced him until he did. And you all may or may not have heard this story. I read an interview with Andrew Young, who was at this meeting, so I take him at his word. On the heels of the passage and the signing of the Voting Rights Act of 1964, this is towards the end of the year, Dr. Martin Luther King had just been awarded the Nobel Prize. And he's meeting with President Johnson, with Andrew Young, in the Oval Office of the White House. He said, Mr. President, that you have used the power at your command to get civil rights across the line, we owe you a debt of gratitude that we can never repay forever, every generation that follows us. Now, Mr. President, we would like to vote. Because in that Civil Rights Act of 1964, there was no provision to address the fact that in Mississippi or Alabama or Texas even, you might have to recite the state constitution or pass a literacy test or tell the county registrar how many jelly beans are in the jar before they will add you to the rolls and let you vote. King says to Johnson, in Selma, Alabama, the vast majority of the residents are black, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a single black person on the voter rolls. Mr. President, this is a democracy in name only, and you have got to do something about it. And Johnson responds, Dr. King, you're right. I would love to help, but I used everything I had to get civil rights done. I simply don't have the power. As they leave the White House, the dejected Andrew Young turns to Dr. King and says, well, what do we do now? And Dr. King responds, we go out there and get this man some power. Over the coming days and weeks and months, everyday Americans, I mean people just like you and me, we took to the State House steps, we wrote our members of Congress, we lit up the switchboard at the White House demanding that voting rights would be passed. Everyone doing their part as best they knew how to somehow break through and make this happen. Until on the 7th of March, 1965, that next year, a 24-year-old John Lewis, 24 years old, leads the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, that very place that King had mentioned to Johnson, and for having the courage of their convictions, he and his fellow marchers are beaten nearly to death. One man actually loses his life in the process. But thank God the press, not the enemy of the people, but I think the best defenders this democracy has ever had, they are there. They broadcast those interviews and that film across the country and around the world, and it is so galvanizing, such a catalyst, that within 8 days is light speed in politics. In 8 days, President Johnson convenes a joint session of Congress. Every member of the House, every member of the Senate. He now has the power that he had lacked before, given to him not by politicians, not by millionaire donors, but by the people, including people who did not even have the power to vote. In that speech to that joint session of Congress, Johnson says, as it was at Concord in Lexington, as it was at that courthouse in Appomattox, I thought he always could have said, as it was on those beaches in Normandy in 1944, so it is today in 1965, that everyday Americans are willing to lay down their lives for this country so that we fulfill that promise to ourselves, to the rest of the world, and to every generation that follows. By that summer, Lyndon Baines Johnson is able to sign the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law, creating democracy for the first time truly in American history. I tell you that story because I want you to think about all of the service, all of the struggle, all of the sacrifice that has come through these 249 years to this moment on the last day of June 2025. To us, we are the heirs of all of that. And what we do with this inheritance is going to define us in the eyes of history, in the conscience of our kids, and it's going to determine what is possible for this country forevermore. If you think about it, every generation preceding us has been more or less able to keep this thing going. And at sometimes, those generations that Johnson mentioned in his speech in March of '65, they have taken these huge leaps. Whether they were battling the British Empire, or the Confederacy, or the Nazis in Normandy, or Jim Crow in the South, they prevailed and they overcame. So when you think about what is going on in the country today, and I know that has to be in part what brought you out here tonight, this unprecedented attack on that Constitution, on the rule of law, on the idea that no one is above or below that one, that we will in fact not have tyrants or kings or fascists or dictators in this country. The attack that you see on our very democracy that's right to vote, I just want you to remember where we came from, what we're made of, who we are at the end of the day. We are Americans, the most amazing people on the face of the planet today, as we have been for 249 years and counting. That's why we're here. We care about this country, and we want to save it. And we don't care, no man for that, what party you belong to, what race you are, what country you came from, how many generations you can count yourself a Texan, or whether you just got here this morning. All that matters to us is that you're here, and that we commit ourselves to working together. And then this, we know very well what we're up against. And we also know what we don't like. I mean, if it weren't enough for us to come up with these ideas on our own, the social media and its algorithms incite the kind of anger and hatred and frustration and doom and despair that so many of us are tempted to feel. And look, that's only natural. I get it, and I feel it sometimes too. But I think most important in this moment is not to define ourselves by what we are against, but instead to tell ourselves what we are for, to tell our family, our friends, and our fellow Americans, if we want to win political power and replace this corrupt, criminal, craven, incompetent administration with something better for the American people, we have to tell them what this future will look like if we're able to win. We're going to talk about how we're going to help those who are hurting, how we're going to right the wrongs that have been committed, how we're going to pursue big, bold, audacious, aspirational ambitions for everyone in this country. Not enough anymore to tell you who's screwing you or who has screwed up. We've got to talk about how we're going to fix a system that has so badly failed so many of our fellow Americans. You all with me on this? I think it's time to do that. And I cannot help but notice the cap that President Lovelady is wearing. He is an Air Force veteran. We have other veterans who are with us here tonight. Raise your hand if you serve this country in uniform. We are grateful to you, especially on the 4th of July holiday, for your service and the example that you set for the rest of us. But as our current president was dropping bombs in Iran recently, and entering this country into yet another war of choice, I could not help but think of those veterans who returned from previous wars of choice. Those who nobly and bravely served in Vietnam, a war this country never understood, and perhaps because of that, never fully supported. And they came back to Beaumont, and to Orange, to Newton, and to Jasper, and my hometown of El Paso, not to ticker tape parades, not to pats on your back to thank you for your service. Sometimes they got nothing at all. Sometimes they were spat upon in the face or on their backs. And what did they do? They nobly got back to work here in their communities, raising their families, building their homes, starting their businesses, working these jobs to make this great country even greater. The Iraq and Afghanistan veterans that I met when I was a member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee in Congress for 6 years, who inhaled literally God only knows what from those burn pits. They were going 24 hours a day, right next to where they were laying their heads. They come back to this year and they say, hey, I can't breathe. I can't function. I can't work. I don't know that I can live. And when I try to go to the VA, they tell me, hey, baby, call back next week or next month or maybe even next year. The wait times that we put these veterans through for a service-connected disability claim or an appointment with a doctor to see their PTSD or traumatic brain injury, it is literally killing those who put their lives on the line for this country. 22 veterans a day, every single day in America, die by their own hand. Sometimes to deny and to delay is to kill those who are willing to pay the ultimate price for America. And in the face of all the lessons we learned from these wars, it is almost beyond belief that this president would enter us into yet another one. And so I think about, how can I meet what I'm against by what I'm for? What if it were that the United States no longer turned its back on its friends and allies? I mean, allies that we've had for 80 years plus, allies that we won in World War II. We've had our back every decade since. And we work with those allies, not to start new wars, but to end the ones that are being waged across this planet, knowing that it's good both for the people who are in conflict today, and it's great for the United States and our national security. And on this issue of nuclear non-proliferation, I mean, I don't think there's a person here who wants Iran or any other country that doesn't already have one to obtain a nuclear weapon. And we should work peacefully, non-violently, diplomatically to bring that to pass. There is a path to get that done. But here's my vision. What if we took it a step further? I don't like the idea that my 3 kids, 18, 17, 14 years old, are growing up in a world where any madman, whether it's Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump, can with one push of one button extinguish human life on this planet. How about a future with no nuclear weapons anywhere in the world, so no one has to fear going out that way? And as long as we're talking peace and our role in the world, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were no longer complicit in the bombing and the starving and the slaughtering of innocent children and families in Gaza as we happened over the last year? What if we work with the awesome convening power that this country enjoys to bring all parties to the table and make sure that we establish a sovereign, independent state for the Palestinian people and guarantee the safety and security of Palestinians, Israelis, everyone who lives in that region, so we are no longer going into these wars and conflicts and do not become complicit in what is absolutely indefensible. And then I like this. Bring that logic back home to the United States of America. Make sure that this country really stands for human rights, not just abroad, but right here at home. What if you didn't have to worry about a plainclothes federal agent without a badge or without a warrant sweeping you up off the streets, detaining you illegally without due process, without due constitutional rights, deporting you to the gulag and El Salvador, for which you will never emerge? And look, I know you all know this, but it is not just undocumented immigrants. And it's not just immigrants. It is kids who are born in the United States who have stage 4 cancer, who are deported without their medications. How can this country live with itself if this country doesn't do something about it? And so I say this, my positive vision against all this stuff is that we recommit ourselves to that Constitution, to our rights that are protected within it, to make sure that we have due process, that we can defend ourselves, and that if somebody wants to come to this country and contribute to our success and to follow the law, then there should be a safe and legal and orderly path for them to be able to do just that. Because we know immigrants make our country better, contribute to the greatness of America. They always have and they always will. And there's a right way to do it. And then for those already here, Democrats, and I happen to be one, have long talked a big game and have long failed to follow through. When we had unitary power in 2009, we had the White House, the House, and the Senate. When we had total control of the federal government in 2021, the White House, the House, and the Senate, we failed to move forward on immigration. Not only did it cost our communities and our families, it cost this country, and I would argue it might have cost us the election in 2024. So next time the Democrats hold power, we legalize every single dreamer, every dreamer's parents, every other hard-working American who puts in an honest day on the job and who keeps the government of U.S. citizens in this country. Let's get that done good. I don't think it's too much to ask. And speaking of those who put in an honest day's work, as you all know, I've been coming to Port Arthur and Orange and Jasper and Beaumont for 8 years. And in that time, I've had a chance to talk to and meet with a lot of those who work at the Exxon Mobil facility nearby. I had a chance to walk with them when they were locked out from the jobs they had given the better part of their lives to. I was with them when their families were picking up food at a food pantry, reduced to this indignity, despite the proud work that they had done for their entire lives. I looked at the profit statement from ExxonMobil for 2024, $34 billion to the positive for the CEOs, the executive suites, and their shareholders. Don't you think there's a little bit left over to make sure that communities like Beaumont and Port Arthur and those who work these jobs create that wealth and secure our energy independence are doing okay as well? Well, yes. We have a country and we have a state in Texas that truly honored everyone's work. No more laws against organizing and forming unions. We want you to be in a union because that union is going to make both you and your employer that much stronger. And if you're earning the minimum wage, and guess what? There are a lot of Texans who still are. It is $7.25 a damn hour right now. We know that you cannot work just one job to make ends meet. You're working 2 or 3 to put food on the table, meet the note on your mortgage, and maybe, just maybe, have something left over at the end of the day. What if we raise that minimum wage to $17 an hour, or $20 an hour, or something you can actually live on, and work just one job? And for those who are working one of the toughest jobs that I can imagine, and I'm talking to you, school teachers, and speech-language pathologists, and the folks who make public education and local schools work for our kids. And I know how hard you work, because I was one of those kids in public schools. My 3 kids are finishing their education in public schools in El Paso right now. You are lucky if you're only working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. I cannot tell you how many restaurants, and every now and then I have a cold beer, how many bars I've been in where the server says, "Hey, I recognize you. I heard you talk about teachers. I'm one of those kindergarten teachers who Monday through Friday is wiping the snot off your kid's face, is making sure that they're okay, is unlocking their lifelong love of learning. And for the privilege of doing that, I'm spilling beer at this bar right now. What if we paid those teachers enough so they just had that one job in front of those kids? They didn't have to worry about anything else. We remove this high-pressure, high-stakes test from their lives and allow them to teach to a child and be with that kid who they've given the best part of their lives to help. And what if we honor them by, when they retire, no longer waiting 20 years for a cost of living adjustment, for those who are on food stamps, after doing their best to help this state realize its future and its potential. And then this budget bill. I don't know if there's anything beautiful about it. Maybe it's big. I don't know if you've seen the numbers. It's going to add just $3.3 trillion to the debt. I mean, George W. added trillions with his big budget deal and tax break for billionaires and millionaires. Then he got us into wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which added trillions of dollars to the debt. Then Donald Trump, during his first administration, passed that first tax bill, added trillions of dollars of debt. And now we're going to add 3.3 more if this sucker passes. But that's not it. This is continuing, as you all probably know, the largest transfer of wealth in all of human history. You go back 10,000 years to the Sumerians, and there's never been anything even close to what we are seeing. This is, as you know, the wealthiest and the most powerful country on the planet. And where did that wealth come from? The billionaires didn't snap their fingers and create it. Maybe they had some good ideas. Maybe they took some risk and initiative. Maybe they knew how to play the game. When I talk about ExxonMobil right now and $34 billion in profit that the shareholders and the top executives enjoy, all of that wealth was created by all of the workers who made it possible. And now they want to take the corporate good. They're targeting the very people who made this country so wealthy and powerful in the first place. They're going to cut tens of millions of our fellow Americans off of Medicaid. We were at a town hall not too far from here in Humboldt, Texas. A woman stood up and she said, "I'm 72. I am the sole caregiver for my 77-year-old husband with Parkinson's. With these Medicaid cuts, our best scenario is that he dies before I do. Because if I go before him, he is fucked. There's nobody to take care of him." And through tears, she said, "I'm going to fight for this guy with everything I've got." I mean, you all know people who are in this situation, who have these long-term chronic illnesses, who have children who are sick and need expensive, complicated, complex care. Not to expand Medicaid, even though we invented the thing in 1965, Lyndon B. Johnson signed that into law in that year as well. So what if, instead of shoveling more trillions to the wealthiest people on the planet, and if I sound a little weird, it's the jet lag from coming back from Jeff Bezos' wedding. I got to see all that stuff. I wasn't there, you weren't there, none of us were invited. What if instead of shoveling more billions to Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and these fantastically wealthy people, look, they deserve their gains to some degree. But it is really hard with a straight face to say that billions upon billions are your right, and that we, the American people, through our representatives, will send you even more going forward, which is what is happening in this bill. So this is a real test and a trial for all of us. This thing has not passed yet. Now, Cynthia, I'm going to ask you for your help right now. How many of you would like to call John Cornyn and tell him to vote no on this thing? Raise your hands. Okay, you're raising two of them. I like that. How many of you actually had the chance to call John Cornyn and tell him? All right. For those who have not, I thought we could call John Cornyn right now. So I'm gonna leave the question open to you all. I'm gonna press two. Hi, Senator Cornyn. This is your old friend, Beto O'Rourke. 600 of your constituents here in Beaumont, Texas tonight. And regarding this big, beautiful bill, all of us would like to say that we would like you to vote no! Message received. Did you heard me? I will not force down who text the messages heard you. But they're going to let them know. Okay, my last piece of just kind of, Beto's dream. What if we had a Democratic Party that actually fought for all these things? And when I say fight, I mean they fight, they don't roll over, they don't bend over, they don't tell us it's over before the fight has even begun. We have a Democratic Party that fights for everyone, not 7 swing states, where they poured $1 billion into in 2024 and lost every single one of them. I mean, everyone everywhere. I mean, Mississippi. I mean, Alabama. I mean, the great state of Texas, too. And when they come to Texas, and when they invest, and when they listen to us, absolutely, we'd love for you to go to Austin. That's natural. And to Dallas, and to Houston, too. But we would also like to see you in Beaumont, in Orange, in Nederland, in every other place that Democrats for far too long have completely written off. And it is no wonder that we struggle so hard to win so many of these critical elections when we're doing this by ourselves. So folks, it is going to take action from us because it might be a while before the National Democratic Party wakes up. And that means when there's a chance to protest, that we protest. I heard that no Kings was not bad here in Beaumont. I heard the hands up. We did do it too. And if you don't see a protest, organize a protest. This stuff is breaking through. It is shaping public opinion. As Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. He counted it more powerful than presidents and legislatures and courts. It makes everything we care about possible. And when your neighbors see you out there, they take a little bit of hope and inspiration. They no longer are tempted to despair. They say, hey, I also want to get into this. If you have thought about running for office, now is the time to do it. Not in 2026, but in 2025. If you've thought about volunteering for somebody who is running for office, now is the time to sign up and get on those campaigns. And lastly, those powered by people volunteers who are in the yellow vests around the room, they will sign you up for our program, which does 2 things, and both are important. 1, we register currently unregistered but eligible voters. And then 2, we acknowledge that this is the toughest state in the nation in which to cast a ballot. That great Voting Rights Act that I told you about at the beginning, completely gutted in 2013 by the decision Shelby versus Holder. There's no pre-clearance. The state of Texas can do everything it wants to, and it does, to keep the most vulnerable from casting that ballot. So the second thing we do is after we register someone to vote in person, we say, hey, would it be cool if I stayed in touch with you? 99 out of 100 times that person says yes. And so we trade cell phone numbers. We don't give it to the Democratic Party. We don't give it to powered by people even. We don't give it to a candidate. It is the person that registered that young person who is staying in touch with you. And they say, hey, it's 30 days since I last saw you. You should have received your voter registration card in the mail. If they haven't, we track that sucker down for them. When we approach the election, we say, you may not know this, but Texas has the strictest voter ID laws in the country. Here's what you're going to need to bring to your polling place. If you have any other questions about the rules, just hit me up. I am here for you. I am your voting Sherpa. And then we tell them, this is your nearest early voting location. Here are the early voting location hours. Here are the dates. And then every single day of early voting, we stay on you until you have told us that you have cast that ballot. Now, let me tell you what happened last year when we ran this program. Nationally, and Texas always performs under the national average. Nationally, young voters, 18 to 29 years old, turned out at a rate of 42%. In Texas, those voters that we met and powered by people that we registered and stayed in touch with turned out at a rate of 79%. So this stuff works. And we would love to have you join us. You can sign up for the votes who are in the yellow. Now, Cynthia Cano, who's in the blue shirt, who let me her phone earlier, she has another microphone. We promised you all a town hall meeting. We're going to try, Cynthia's going to try to get to as many people as she can. If you have a question, a suggestion, an idea that you want to bring to everyone's attention, raise your hand Cynthia will call on you, we'll bring you in, and we'll try to get as many voices in this conversation as we can. Thank you, Beaumont, for coming out here today. Thank you, Southeast Texas. That's a good debate.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. I'm born and raised in Orange, Texas. I'm a veteran. I came to Houston about 10 volts. I appreciate you coming here to us. My question is, as someone who's worked hard to unify progressives and mobilize Texas, how do you see Bobby Cole as governor and Colin Allred as senator fitting into the future of Texas leadership? Do you believe they are aligned with the kind of bold, people-centered politics we need, or do you see key differences in vision or approach that voters should be aware of? And if so, what are our alternatives?
So thank you first and foremost for your service to our country, for being here today, and for asking this question. Who are we going to see on the ballot in Texas in 2026? Here's my theory of the case, and I'll get to the spirit of your question about Bobby Cole and Colin Allred, and really anybody else who might be considered. As you all may or may not know, I ran for Senate in 2018. Some of you were with me during that.
Are you running yet?
Well, we'll see. We'll see. We got pretty damn close. 2.5%, 215,000 votes. I mean, I got to tell you, some part of me still thinks that we actually won that thing. I went into the election. Well, down ballot, because there were so many extraordinary people running, we had the largest voter turnout for a Democrat in Texas history. We were the first Democrat since LBJ in '64 to win the 5 major metro areas and their surrounding counties. Young voter turnout, because we were hanging out on college campuses and meeting young voters, up 513%. What I learned from that is 2 things. One, all those amazing down ballot candidates, so-called people voting for running for state house and U.S. Congress, they were meeting their neighbors and folks I would never get a chance to connect with, and getting them to vote, and those votes were traveling up the ballot for U.S. Senate race. We were also helping a little bit in our way. 12 insurgent Democrats defeated 12 incumbent state legislators. You saw 2 incredible insurgent Democrats defeat 2 incumbent entrenched Republican congresspeople, including Colin Allred beating Pete Sessions. In Harris County, 17 black women won election to judicial positions. It was a transformative deal, right? And then the Republican legislature meets in 2019, changes all the election laws to make it that much harder for us ever to do anything like that. And one of the things they did in 2021, after the census and the redistricting, and the congressman talked about this attempt to redistrict yet again, is they made these state house, and U.S. congressional districts less competitive. So there were fewer people running. So when I ran for governor in 22, we didn't have all that energy and action coming up from the bottom of the ballot to help the top of the ballot candidates. So my theory of the case for what it is going to take, no matter if it's the folks you named or anybody else, you need the strongest possible candidate who can connect with people, inspire voters, help those who have not participated in past elections have a reason to vote in the next one. You need that person as Senate. You need a person just like them in governor. You need a person just like that for attorney general. And you need someone like that for lieutenant governor. And in every single race down the ballot has to have a Democrat. And look, truth be told, a lot of these races, those Democrats are probably going to lose. But what they're going to do in the process is they're going to be connecting with voters we never otherwise reach. They're going to be setting themselves up for victories in future cycles, and they're going to make it that much more likely that someone from Texas is finally going to punch through to the Senate for the first time since 1988, Boyd Benson being the last Democrat to do that. And if we pull that off, it is going to be seismic. It'll change the balance of power in the Senate on important votes like the ones that we're going through right now today. And it will also open Texas up to true competition in 2028. The day that a Democrat once again wins Texas is the day that a Republican can no longer find the front door to the White House. So we got to give this one all we got, the best we can possibly do. Thank you for asking.
My name's Callie. I last saw you at a Jinx concert in the Woodlands about 3 years ago.
You were the one cheering. Really loud, yeah.
Very loud. As someone who currently works in mental health, I see how badly we need more support in Texas. Would you have any plans to strengthen community health services, especially for our youth?
Yes, and thank you for working in community health. I mean, this is another one of the most important jobs that I can think of that is under attack. It's on the chopping block right now. What's going to happen if we take millions of people off of Medicaid in the state of Texas, folks who are just barely hanging on by their fingernails? I mean, we know the physical health consequences. We were just in Laredo 2 days ago. We saw this guy that I first met in 2018 who introduced himself to me, Joey, had diabetes and glaucoma and no health care and no access to insulin, which is just nuts because it costs nothing to produce and literally would save his life. He got to see a federally qualified healthcare provider once in his life, and that doctor said, if you don't get some help, Joey, you are dead by the age of 35. He was in his mid-20s at the time. I'm happy to report Joey is still alive, was able to get health care, finished his education at TAMU, but we know the physical health care consequences of a lack of access to a doctor. Mental health care, you know, I just talked about those veterans that we are losing daily in this country for our lack of political will because we do not lack the resources to help them. And in this great state of Texas, the largest provider of mental health care services for the rest of us is the county jail system. The largest inpatient mental health care provider in the state of Texas is the Harris County Jail. Now, how screwed up is that? I don't know what it costs us now, $119, $126 a night to incarcerate somebody with schizophrenia who may or may not get access to any kind of medication or any kind of help, and who may be back out on the street again using street drugs, not because he wants to get high, but because it's the only medication he can find or afford. It is counterproductive, it is cruel, and it is incredibly expensive. So my case to John Cornyn, next time I leave him a message, is don't vote for this bill. Do not cut Medicaid, because in fact, if you are a fiscal conservative, this is the wisest investment of money that we can make. If we make sure that you're okay in your mental health care, then you are healthy and well enough to finish your education, to go to work, to raise your kids, to run for office, to create amazing art or poetry that is going to blow our minds and make the world even better. Whatever you are placed on this planet to perform, I just want you to be healthy enough to be able to get it done. So I would love to see a Texas and an America where healthcare is just a human right. You cannot be too poor, too unlucky, too this, too that. If you're here, you're going to get help. Thank you.
Here we go. Hi, my name is Farah Swati. I own a business in Port Arthur, Texas, in oil and gas. And I'm not here for the Democratic Party or Republican Party. I'm here as an individual and a taxpayer and a citizen. Bernie Sanders endorsed you recently, I found out, and so I'm going with Bernie Sanders all the way. And so I thought I would listen to you and see what you have to say. So my question to you is not related to Southeast Texas, but to the mayor's race in New York. Your thoughts on Zohran Mamdani, and a little bit detail, please, because the Democratic Party leadership has been extremely disappointing and, in my opinion, disgusting. So please let us know.
Yeah. So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, this was like the political shocker so far of 2025. An absolutely unknown 33-year-old New York assemblyman who caucuses with the Democratic Socialists of America defeated the most powerful family in New York politics, Andrew Cuomo, in the Democratic primary last week. I hope you all saw that. I think, to answer your question, Mamdani is one of the most exciting people in politics today. That was one of the most transformational victories that we have seen. And why did that guy win? You know, we started this meeting talking about focusing on what we're for instead of what we're against. I don't know that I heard, you know, Andrew Cuomo's name come out of the guy's mouth. I don't know that I heard him talk about Donald Trump or the bad people who are trying to get us. He listened to his fellow New Yorkers. He rode the subway, he rode the buses, he went into delis, he went into mosques and churches, and everywhere that he could find people exactly where they were, meeting people where they are at. The number one thing they told me is that I cannot afford to live in the most expensive city in the United States of America. He said, okay, well, what would make it easier for you? Well, the bus is what I rely on. It's how I get to work. It's how I get to the movies. It's how I go pick up my kids at school. It's really expensive. It's a huge budget item. He said, okay, free buses for our fellow New Yorkers. People said, you know what? The rents are going through the roof. I can't afford to stay in this city and work the job that I'm working. I'm going to have to move somewhere else. And he said, okay, how about we freeze the rents for those who cannot afford to pay a higher rent? He gave a solution to that problem as well. Some folks said, I live in a food desert. I literally cannot get healthy calories into the body of my kid to burn while they're at school learning in these great classrooms. And Mom Donnie said, okay, how about we run a pilot of city-owned grocery stores? Now, you don't have to agree with every one or any of those propositions, but you must confirm and acknowledge that he was speaking to the very real needs that he heard from his fellow New Yorkers, and they elected him, at least in that primary, in a shocking, overwhelming victory against the old guard. And so here's my thought. We should all get behind Mom Donnie. We should ensure that he wins that general election in November, and we should learn from him. And look, the needs in Beaumont are different than the needs in Manhattan. And for those who want to win election in Beaumont or Port Arthur, and we have two people who have done that as mayor right here, they know what I'm talking about. You go and meet people where they are, listen to what their concerns are, hear about their hopes and dreams, and then you campaign on it, and then once in office, you deliver. I think that's the way forward, and Mom Donnie is showing us right now. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
Behind you.
Hey, my name is Alan Anderson. I'm very engaged politically, but I want to just illustrate something you said earlier about Democrats not fighting, just in case anybody ain't having a hard time understanding what you're talking about. And we all remember when Barack Obama was president and he was giving that State of the Union address, and that Coward stood up and said he was a lie. The reason why he did that because he felt like, I know I can do this because he ain't gonna do nothing about it. If he thought that Obama would have left that podium and came down there and stuffed that microphone he had up his behind, he wouldn't have said it. But the difference, another thing to illustrate it, we talk about Democrat and Republican, but to me it's people who stand on the side of white supremacy, racism, bigotry, misogyny, and injustice, and then there's the people on the other side who stand for what's right and equality and justice for all. Okay? Now, to illustrate the difference, what has been, whether you like it or not, if somebody's running for president, they're either gonna win as a Democrat or a Republican. You can call yourself anything else you want to, but at the end of the day, it's gonna be more people aligned with the equality and justice, or more people aligned with white supremacy and bigotry and all the other stuff. Now, to make the other illustration, when we had those two Republican ops, when Biden was president, them Republican ops, Manchin and Sinema, when we could have got a new voting rights bill passed, they knew they could do that because they knew they wasn't gonna get no pushback from the Democratic Party. Today, Tom Tillis, Republican senator from North Carolina, he stood up and said, I'm not supporting this wretched ass bill. He didn't say that, but I'm saying it for him. Immediately, what did Trump do? Oh, I'm gonna primary you. They know that if they challenge the people who are in favor of white supremacy and bigotry and all the other stuff, if they have to kill them, they would do it. The difference has been people who are on the side of wrong, they're willing to do anything to win, up to and including murder. So what I want to encourage everybody in this room to do tonight is be ruthless for what's right. I'm not saying go out and murder nobody. You ain't got to beat nobody up. But people need to know that, hey, I'm not messing with him because he don't play that shit. Don't stop tolerating people that you know in your family, your friends, your coworkers. Quit tolerating the racism, the white supremacy, the bigotry, the misogyny. Stand up to them. If they know that you're going to do something about it, they're not going to mess with you. But if they know they can run all over you, they're going to keep on doing what they've been doing. So I'm encouraging everybody, go out and fight for what's right.
I love that. Be ruthless for what's right.
Hi, my name is Nelda, and I'm a federal employee with Social Security Administration. I'm also American Federation of Government Employees elected official, so I serve. The problem that I have is with all these changes, my counterparts lost their jobs. I'm fighting trying to get Social Security benefits processed and everything for these individuals. What are they going to do to help me get coworkers in there so they can fight in the line with me? Secondly, I am a business owner as well. With that being said, my property's been broken into several times. So I would like police officers to live and police the neighborhoods. How can Congress do that for me?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So look, on this first issue of Social Security, how did we even get to this place? If you look at the 2024 election, maybe even go back further to 2010 when the Supreme Court, in their infinite wisdom, and they've been deciding some doozies recently, in their Citizens United decision said that money is speech and corporations are people, and therefore corporations can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence the outcomes of election. Elon Musk in 2024 spent nearly $250 million, one single person, nearly $250 million to one candidate and one campaign. And then it is no surprise after Donald Trump wins, he literally hands Musk the keys to the kingdom, including to the Social Security Administration and to the private, privileged, personal information of every single one of us, because every single one of us who has worked a day in their lives is in that system right now. Then to add insult to injury, they cut the number of staffers there who are trying to help us and our kids, those with disabilities, our survivors from dependent spouses, to get the help that they need, that they paid into. No entitlements here, right? No giveaway, no handout. Every single one of us has paid into that every single working day. And so I just want to make sure that we connect the dots on this stuff. This just didn't come out of nowhere. When you allow unlimited amounts of corporate money in politics, you get something far less than a democracy, and you no longer have the consent of the governed. And so, even more important that we do everything we can to stop this bill, this big budget bill that has enshrined in it these cuts to the Social Security Administration, to other federal workers. I mean, some of them we've already lost. Those who were working in USAID, which was doing nothing more but saving hundreds of thousands of children in Africa from certain death of AIDS, a program in PEPFAR that was signed into law by George W. Bush and kept in by every single succeeding administration. They're cutting them down one by one by one, and now they're coming for us. So the only thing I can tell you, I mean, obviously we've got to win political power back in 2026 to provide a check on this government. We just lost one of the best checks we had when the Supreme Court just ruled that federal judges could not enjoin the president from nationwide injustice, as he has been infamous for doing over the course of his term. But then there's this. You know, I told you that great story at the beginning about John Lewis in 1965. It wasn't an election year. He wasn't a voter. His name wasn't on the ballot. But he and everybody who marched with him got the attention of the conscience of this country and forced the hand of the president. In 2018, when Donald Trump in his first term was taking babies from their mothers at the border in a policy known as family separation, many of us stood up to be counted. Many of you came to El Paso, Texas, to our county, to a tent encampment in Tornillo. This is where they were warehousing these kids who had been stolen from their parents. More than 1,000 of us showed up there on Father's Day 2018. We were there to testify to our fellow Americans what was being done in our name, and it so raised the pressure on the president. He knew this policy was so damn unpopular that within 3 days, he rescinded family separation. So look, protest doesn't work every time. But when it does, as it did in 1965, as it did in 2018, it can literally change this country. So if you do not like what you are hearing right now, then let's make sure that all of our voices are heard. Let's add to those phone calls to Cornyn's and Cruz's office. Let's get out there and protest on the streets of Beaumont or wherever we live. I mean, you might feel ridiculous with that sandwich board on at that intersection all by yourself. I guarantee you, you're going to get some thumbs up, probably some birds as well. You're going to get honks of support, and you're going to give other people hope and inspiration. On this issue of local crime, you know, I'm tempted to ask Constable Bates to come up and answer that question, but yeah. If he wants to, or anybody in law enforcement, welcome to answer that question. But when it comes to the federal connection, to the national government's connection to this, you know, when we cut back on things like CDBG funding so that there's programming for our kids after school, when we close down our recreation centers early instead of keeping them open all day, when we cut grants to local police forces to make sure that they have the equipment and training that they need, then it hurts us in our communities. And that's what this government is trying to do right now. Thank you for asking.
All right, folks, there are a lot of hands up. So I will ask you to please keep your questions short so I can get to as many people as I can.
Brother Beto.
Sir.
For everybody who don't know, my name is Stephen Lovelady. I'm the president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 479. Brother Beto has visited us before on 2 occasions, if I remember. And Brother Beto is welcome in this hall at any time he wants to be here.
Thank you.
Now, let's get to something that you brought up. You gave us a history lesson of the Constitution. IBEW has a Constitution too. And in our preamble, one of the things that is in that Constitution is we will expel from our midst any communism, Marxism, or any other ism, Trumpism, from our midst. Labor has been attacked and attacked and attacked for decades. I've lived it. I've been doing this for 45 years. My father, an electrician from Local Union 479, an Army veteran, making $3 an hour over in the orange shipyards. He breaks out, gets to the inside, he's making $5 an hour. Now, back then in the late 1950s, that was a lot of money. When I broke out and got to be a journeyman, I was making $19.63 an hour. And that was good money back in '84. Right now, I'm making around a little bit over 33. But because of the taxes that's been put on by the Trump administration in 2 terms, my dollar will not stretch any further. Ladies and gentlemen, every one of you here tonight works for a living, I'm sure. You have scraped, you have sacrificed, you have been working. Well, I'm 68 years old, I'm still freaking working, dude. I should be retired. Why? I can't. Why? Because there is no way on God's green earth that I'm going to be able to survive on Social Security and the meager pension I get from my union. But ladies and gentlemen, the way that we combat this, right to work has been on the books since the 1930s. Right to work does not allow a union to go in any place and try to organize a place that doesn't want to be organized. All we can do is get them outside and talk to them. We need to rescind right to work in the state of Texas and in the United States, period. So everyone who wishes or thinks they want to join a union will have the opportunity to do that. And we will welcome anyone who is willing to listen to us. You don't have to join our union if you don't want to. If you're happy with where you're at, good for you. But if you want to have representation that's honest, like Brother Beto, if you want to have benefits that are going to be great for you, like Brother Beto wants us to have, if you want to have a career like I've had over the past 45 years, you want to have a career, you want to have workplace protections, you want to have some insurance, you want to have some a decent freaking way to save money, they're trying to join a union. But we invite everybody out there, but right to work laws have to go, Brother Beto, across the United States. And I want to see a bill in Congress to eliminate or outlaw any right-to-work laws in all the 50 states in Puerto Rico and our other places. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Lovely. I could not agree with you more. And that's the fight that we're talking about. And that's the fight that established these things. That was a fight of FDR nearly 100 years ago, facing some of these same challenges, the rise of tyranny and fascism. And what did he do? He established the Social Security Administration. He established the WPA program. He got behind these unions so that folks had the right and the power to organize. We need that fight back within the Democratic Party. Thank you very much.
All right, we're gonna try a speed round, Beto. So I'm gonna take 1, 2, 3. They're gonna ask the questions and then we'll see if we can answer.
Okay.
Real fast, I want to address tax abatements in Texas. It's an imbalance, and we know we need business, but we're destroying our communities. They're dilapidated. We don't have any protection for our infrastructure, environment. Schools are being starved. I want to see Texas take a stand on that and renegotiate those abatement agreements so that our communities benefit at least as much as these corporations are making off of us.
I love that. All right, I'm going to answer that one after I hear these other two.
So I'm with the grassroots organization that's working to register voters here locally in Southeast Texas. What strategies or messaging have you seen work to break through voter apathy? Because that's something that we struggle with here.
Gotcha.
Joanne Foster, I'm a Vietnam era veteran. I didn't serve over in Vietnam, but I served here. The biggest discriminatory decision was a decision pertaining to Monsanto and Fort McClellan, Alabama. For your information, Fort McClellan, Alabama was the primary training for the Women's Army Corps before it became permanent army. In a decision by the court, which granted $500 billion to Anniston, Alabama, and the county in which it is, they left out all the military personnel who served at Fort McClellan, mostly women, because that was basic training for women. And it's extremely discriminatory, and we need to do something about it.
Thank you. Thank you for these questions. Let me start with tax abatements. Bring everybody on the same page. This is where your local government, a school district, a county, or a city says, hey, big employer, you come bring these jobs to my community, or you make this capital investment, you build this big operating facility, and you don't have to pay taxes, or you don't have to pay as much taxes as everyone else for a certain period of time, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The problem is, and I was on the city council of El Paso for 6 years, they often don't come through with the promised jobs or the jobs at the pay rate that we want, or they're not union jobs where the workers are actually protected. And if someone in the bargain is not paying their taxes, then everyone else pays a little bit more. And that's what we discovered in El Paso. So we stopped doing these tax abatement deals for call centers and shopping malls. And we said, look, you'd be lucky to come to El Paso. Just come here and do this and hire the people here. They're fucking amazing. And we're not going to give you a tax break, okay? Because then everybody else that I represent has to pay more in taxes. In terms of strategies to attract eligible but unregistered voters, powered by people we set up on college campuses all across the state, including Lamar. And look, I'd love it if we just dressed up as Uncle Sam and had a copy of the Declaration of Independence and people wanted to come up and get registered. But instead, to catch their interest and begin the conversation, we might say, how about a donut or a slice of pizza? We want to talk about whether or not you are registered, and sometimes just having some food, having a conversation, having other people who are like those that we're trying to register helps to be like kind of an icebreaker. And then we start talking about, you know, the price of housing or college tuition. And wouldn't it be nice if it changed? And oh, by the way, this is how it changes. You get registered, you vote, we elect people who will do this. On this issue that you brought up, ma'am, from the Vietnam War era, just as a reminder for everybody, it took this country, if you can believe it or not, 40 years to treat exposure to Agent Orange as a presumptive condition for the cancers and the diseases that were killing the men and women who served and were stationed overseas. 40 years where people were showing up to the doctor's office or the VA and they're like, hey, I can't breathe, or these tumors are growing in my body, and I think it was that stuff that I was inhaling in Vietnam. And you know what the government said for 40 years? Good luck, you're on your own. We had nothing to do. 40 years, that happened, by the way, We finally acknowledged what we had done during the Obama administration. And did it cost us a lot to treat those who were exposed to Agent Orange? Yes, hundreds of millions, if not more. But we will pay any price, and we will bear any burden for anyone who has put their life on the line for this country and been willing to serve. And that includes you as well. And I want to make sure that we understand how we can successfully advocate for you and other veterans in a similar situation to make sure that we get this right. Thank you for asking.
All right, I have time for 2 more speed rounds. I will hold the mic. You can ask the question.
I'm Macy Jensen. I turned 16 in 2 weeks, and something I've found in school is that I can never get enough information about what is presently going on both around the world and like in my community. It only teaches about absolutely anything else, and I was wondering if there was anything we could do to get more information to us so that way we can be prepared for the future whenever we are ready to get involved with everyone else.
Good afternoon. My name is Mickey Mosley. I'm the president of 13243 United Steelworkers here in Beaumont, Texas. And thank you for coming down a few years ago during our lockout. You walked picket with us. You came by the pantry like you talked about earlier. He mentioned a couple of things tonight, and I want to point out something that the brother with the IBW had said earlier about right to work. Something a little bit more scary than that. When you talk about police officers that are scooping people up, I said police, federal agents that are scooping people up off the streets. When you talk about the Civil Rights Act earlier, something that affects every person that's in this room tonight is the National Labor Relations Act of 1930. Google it. You've got billionaires and you've got corporations that are suing to repeal that. They're saying it's unconstitutional. That affects everybody in this room. That affects your right to organize. That affects your right to work for overtime. It affects everybody in this room. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right, and last one over here.
All right.
Over there.
My name is Howard Davis. I'm just an old retired Democrat. Is democracy going to survive Donald Trump?
A nice, easy one for the last question of the night. Oh, wait, I think we're going to have a fourth one. Okay, so answers. Okay, beginning with Macy. Can we hear it from Macy, 16 years old, at a town hall? Go, Macy. You know, if you have not heard this question before, I will share with you. I'm on college campuses all the time with Powered by People, registering young voters. And I cannot tell you how many times someone like Macy has approached me, or after I get them registered to vote, they say, hey, Beto, how do you know what's true? And the first time I heard that, I thought, is this a trick question? And then I realized that likely, and this is an example from El Paso, you know, they're not reading the El Paso Times. It's kind of a skeleton of what it once was as a newspaper. They're not tuning in to broadcast news. You know, when I was growing up, it was Dan Rather on the CBS Evening News, watching it with my dad every night. They're probably not watching cable news, whether it's Fox, MSNBC, CNN, Newsmax, or anything else. Best shot they have of getting any shred of truth is on TikTok, or Instagram. And because we treat them like utilities who are not responsible for what is passing through their pipes, even though we have become the products of these algorithms and they're making billions of dollars off of us, we cannot do anything to regulate the misinformation and lies, that's the more accurate word for it, that so many people, including young people, are receiving right now. I wish I had a great answer for how we fix this. Some ideas. There is a free online Texas newspaper called the Texas Tribune, which is pretty good, independent, objective reporting and writing, doesn't have a bias, follows what's going on in the state legislature, follows what's going on in Congress and the White House from a Texas perspective. I know that there's a local paper here. If you can't afford a subscription, you know, perhaps they have a free version. I don't know if there's a reporter from the local paper who can help us with that. And then sometimes there are these independent nonprofit newsrooms in our communities And in El Paso, there's one called El Paso Matters. So I would look for that as well. And then lastly, because I'm just going to assume for the sake of the argument, you're on some of these platforms like TikTok and Instagram, as you find the truth, because so many of your peers are getting all their information on these places, anything you can do to share that, like share what you heard tonight and how it struck you and what it moves you to do going forward. I think that's going to be very powerful going forward. So I thank you for that.
All right.
National,
Sorry,
you don't
Spencer,
want
go
me to
ahead.
answer
No, no,
these?
you go ahead, sorry.
Okay, the National Labor Relations Board mentioned 1930. We were talking earlier about what if Democrats fought. They used to fight. President Roosevelt coming into office in the midst of the Great Depression, you know, facing these threats that would culminate in World War II and the loss of tens of millions of lives around the world, beating back fascism, saving democracy here at home, which is going to get us to our next question. He was also fighting for the working woman and the working man to make sure that they had a fair shake and even shot of being represented, for the pay that they would receive, for the working conditions that would allow them to safely return home to their kids. And as the gentleman points out, it's not just good for members of unions, it's good for every other single working American. The benefits all accrued to all of us. These tech bros who think that their billions were made by their own genius and other corporate titans of the extraordinary wealth and power that we see in America today don't want any of this to remain, even in states like Texas that is right to work, where we barely have the right to organize right now. So much as we talked about Social Security and some of these other agencies under attack and under threat right now, if you care about this, this is the time to stand and be counted. This is the time to speak up and to be heard, because if you're silent, you are complicit in what will come. And look, there will come a time where your kids or your grandkids or your great-grandkids will say, hey, Mom, Grandpa, what were you guys thinking in 2025 when 249 years into this thing, you all lost what my history book tells me Lincoln called the last best hope of Earth? Now we cannot be on the receiving end of that question. We absolutely have to come through. And the most sacred part of this is reflected in the question that we were asked, the last of the trifecta, which is, will our democracy, government of, by, and for the people, something that is vanishingly rare in the whole of human history, like sparked up 2,500 years ago on the Greek peninsula in Athens, and then it faded from sight for millennia before coming up again right now. Like, I'm trying to make the point that this thing is not going to roll of its own accord. In fact, every one of the odds are against this thing even surviving another year. And you have the most concerted attack against it happening at this moment. And so the question is not for me, it is for all of us. Are you willing to do what you can with what you have, where you are today, not in 2026 or in 2028, to save it? If we do, then we'll answer Lincoln's question, where he asked that generation of the 1860s, will we be the ones who either meanly lose or nobly save this last best hope of Earth? And I will be damned if we're the ones who lose it. Are you all with me in this? So I think that's our answer.
Here's our last three questions.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Merwin, and I have 2 kids in public school in Beaumont. And I am very concerned about the book banning that Texas is doing, Florida is doing, especially in regards to trans, queer, and racial minorities. What can we do as parents to stop this from happening?
Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Jessica Forgy. I am trying to primary Brandy Weber. Yes, and Rhonda. Hey, if we're the 2 in the November election in 2026, that's what we need to do. But in Congress, how can we pass a modern equal rights amendment that did not make it through the states in the 60s? And what can we do to finish the work of the ACA and have single payer health care?
Great.
And last question.
My name is Sharon Green, and I want to address some things that extends Texas. And my questions is, have Democrats considered eliminating the electoral college? Like one person, one vote. Make it one person, one vote. Also, eliminate lifetime positions. If a person is in a position and he commit a crime, he needs to go.
Yes.
And also, as it relates to the president, the statute is we can't arrest a president, but if he commit a crime, his ass needs to go.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Man, that's great. I think that's the fighting spirit you were talking about earlier. So, on this thing on book bans, I thought we had pressing issues in this country and in this world, like, maybe climate change, extinguishing life as we know it, or the tens of trillions of dollars that we're putting future generations into debt for, or the wars that are waging around the world, or inability to take care of those who have served in them. But no, there's a bigger problem. Apparently, our librarians are secretly pornographers, and they're trying to peddle these books to our children right under our nose. Thank God we've got everybody hot and bothered about that. And it's like the other issue that was mentioned in conjunction with this one, that somehow someone of the opposite gender of your child is going to sneak into their bathroom and do something to them, or your child is going to be unfairly posed against another child on a volleyball court, and then that's going to be the end of the world. And I don't mean to diminish people who have concerns about these issues. Obviously, let's hear one another out. Let's get an idea of where you're coming from. I want to understand your perspective, but let's also put this whole question into the larger perspective of what's happening in this country right now. The gentleman just asked, are we about to lose our democracy? They want us focused on trans kids. They ran billions of dollars in ads about trans people last time, maybe because they want you focused on them, 1% of the goddamn population, instead of the 1% who's taking everything else from the rest of the population. I think that might have something to do with it. So let us not play their game. Let's stay focused on the big questions. There was another one about the Equal Rights Amendment, and I think it's a fitting question given the fact that we live in a state that passed the most obscene abortion ban in America. There is no exception for rape, incest, nor is there an exception for the life of the mother, and we already know that it has cost the lives of mothers in Texas already. So do we need additional protections enshrined in the Constitution? Absolutely. But let me tell you this, to give you some hope, because I know it can seem hopeless at times in Texas, especially for women and for girls. A little more than 50 years ago, abortion was just as illegal in the state of Texas as it is today. No one rode to our rescue. In fact, it was women from the state of Texas. You all know the name Jane Roe, and her attorneys, Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington, who came from big, blue, progressive Abilene, Texas. Those three young women, Sarah Weddington, the most complex case she had ever handled before Roe versus Wade was a no-fault divorce. And yet she was able to prevail 4 years out of law school upon an all-male United States Supreme Court in 1973 to confer protection for this fundamental right that all of us have to do what we wish with our own bodies, our own health care, and our own future. And I know that that right has been taken away by this president and his Supreme Court, but I know what Texas women are capable of. They've done it once before, they will do it again. So my money is on the women of Texas coming through again. And you all, and Rhonda Hart, who's here also running, you are great examples of it. There was one more question, Connor. Oh my gosh, this great question, and the fight that you showed when you asked about the Electoral College and about a president who commits crimes and who should no longer be in office. I mean, that's one. Like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when those who are descended from us are reading their history books, they will not be able to believe that this guy who was indicted, I can't count how many times, who was also convicted, who incited violence from his followers to stop the peaceful transfer of power for the first time in American history. And while he was running for president in 2024, he promised us he would be a dictator on day one. And I could see my great-great-grandson being like, you motherfuckers voted for this guy after all of that stuff and he got into power? What were you thinking? What were you thinking? I don't know that we were thinking, but we are now. And look, none of us are going to hold our breath hoping that that craven, cowardly Congress is going to impeach the guy, though he certainly deserves it. None of us are going to hold our breath with the Supreme Court. They literally ruled while he was a candidate that the president is immune from crimes that he's committed once he is in office. And they even argued, the president's team, that if the president chose to assassinate one of his political opponents, but did it as an official act of the presidency, that too would be protected. You cannot make this stuff up, but it's happening right now. And then just within the last, 24, 48 hours, the courts rule that we can no longer have federal judges provide a check on the president. When he says, and this one is just going to blow people's minds, in 1868, following the Civil War, in the 14th Amendment, it says, if you are born in the United States of America, you are a United States of American citizen, right? President Trump, on the first day in office, says, I know that we fought that war. I know that we passed that amendment. I know that it says it in the Constitution, but by executive order, I'm now saying that if your parents came from somewhere else, if they came from England or Ghana or Mexico or Vietnam or anywhere else, and my forefathers came from Ireland, yours probably came from somewhere else as well. If that is the case, you are no longer due U.S. citizenship. And we can round you up on the streets through these plainclothes, unbadged, masked agents and send you to some country you've never been to before, whose language you don't speak. And so judges across the country said, no, this is wrong. This is illegal. This is unconstitutional. We enjoin you, Mr. President, meaning we are stopping you from doing this nationwide. The Supreme Court just ruled that judges can no longer do that. So in some states where federal judges have the power to enjoin the president, your citizenship is protected. In other states, like Texas, which has not enjoined the president, if your parents were born somewhere else, but you were born in the United States, you could be deported. That is incredibly messed up. But none of those outside actors, the courts, the Congress, certainly the president or his administration, are going to save us at this moment of truth. It really is going to be the American people. And that can sound like a line. It might come off as corny to you. I don't think it has ever been more true than it is at this moment. We really will lose the whole thing if we don't stand up, grab it, and take it back right now. So whatever form it takes, commit yourself to the action necessary. It is the antidote to any despair that you're tempted to feel, and it is the key to victory. You with me on this? All right, we together? We have got to do this if we are going to come through. They're counting on us. Beaumont, Southeast Texas, thank you for coming out here tonight. This has been a real honor and a pleasure for us. We're going to hang out for a little while in case anyone wants to take a picture. If you do take a picture, share it on TikTok or Instagram or social media and tell people why you came and what you're going to do to save this country. Gracias.
In the back of the room, folks, if you get in line in the back of the room, if you want to say hi or take a quick picture.
Do you want to do an interview? Yeah. Well, no, with, I can set that up. Just hang right here and I'll get it. Yep.